In this particular lecture, let's learn about the next way of using styling in React components, and that is by making use of simple CSS style sheets. So we all know that CSS style sheets are nothing but they are a .css extension files which has a whole bunch of CSS classes, and then we use those classes and apply them to these elements which we have. So first of all, let's go ahead and let's define a style sheet right here. So inside the source folder, what you could do is you could create a new folder called as CSS. So this is completely optional, but as we want to keep things organized, we will create a separate CSS folder for this one. And inside the CSS, I could create a CSS file and I could name this file as something. So let's name it as style.css. And in this particular file, I could define the regular CSS styling which I want to. So let's say in here we want to style this inline component itself, but instead of styling it inline, now we want to use the CSS styling. So here I could define a class for this h1 if I want to style it up. So let's define a class called as header. So I would say .header. So this is nothing but it's plain simple CSS. So you do the same thing in plain simple HTML and CSS files as well. That is, you define a CSS class and then you define the CSS properties. So let's say you want to set the color of the header to gray. So I could say color gray. And then let's say I want to set the background color of this thing to yellow. So I could say yellow. And let's say the font size which I want is going to be 40 pixels. So 40 pixels. All right. So once we have defined the styling, now let's say I want to apply the styling to this component which we have, or more specifically this h1 inside this inline component which I have. So right now this is using a styling from this inline styling. So let's get rid of that inline styling from here. Let's also get rid of the style tag as well. And now as I actually want to use the styling which is defined in here, first of all I have to import this style.css file in there. So over here, depending upon the structure of where your component is inside your project and depending upon where your CSS file is, you have to import that up over here. So in this case, we have to import style.css in the inline component. So first we have to go one folder back, and then we have to go inside CSS, and then we have to go inside style.css. So over here I could say, okay, import. Then if I want to go one folder back, I would say .. and now I have access to the CSS folder. So / CSS, and then / the file which is style.css. All right. So now we have successfully imported the CSS file here. So this CSS file has this header class. So that means I could now make use of that header class over here and apply that class directly over here. So whenever you have to apply some CSS class in HTML to a particular HTML element, you say class name and then you define that particular class up over here like header. However, as this is not normal HTML, we have to do something different. So instead of class name, here we define a JSX attribute called as class name in kind of the camel case notation. And over here, we simply could pass in the header class which we have. So if I do that, and if I now go back here, as you can see, now the styling has been applied to this particular component. So this is how you could go ahead and make use of a CSS style sheet to style your React components. Now, one advantage of using this style sheet is that you could define multiple classes in here. And after defining multiple classes, you could simply import that particular file in each one of the components which you have, and then you could simply use the class names over here to the elements which you want to style. So this was the second way of styling elements inside a React component. Now in the next lecture, we are going to learn about the third and one of the most commonly used ways of styling React components, and that is by making use of CSS modules. So let's learn how styling using CSS modules is different from using regular CSS style sheets. So let's learn about CSS modules in the next one.